of our conference today. I hope that you had a chance to get up and move around a little bit. I hope you've eaten at some point during the day. And I'm here with a phenomenal leader, colleague, and overall just lady. So I'm going to give, you've heard from me before, so Demetris, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I am Demetris Cheatham, and I can say that my most absolute privilege that I have of doing right now is I am an adjunct faculty member at Poole College of Management. I actually teach MIE 310 Intro to Entrepreneurship. This is my second semester, and I'm loving every bit of it. So in my spare time, I am the Global Diversity and Inclusion Lead at Red Hat. Been there for about a year now. And before then, I just came from Washington, D.C., where I was the Chief of Staff for a D.C. Council member. Also was the Executive Director of the National Bar Association. And when you talk about being radical, I was the first woman and the youngest Executive Director in their 85-year history at the time. So that was something really, really cool. I have a law degree and an MBA from the University of Maryland. Don't hold that against me. But I do have the pleasure of being a fellow Aggie. I'm an alum from North Carolina A&T State University, the same that Gina went to for undergrad. So it was cool to see a lot of Aggie prides in the chat room. But again, I am all about Wolfpack these days.
Well, we are so glad that you are in the pack. And there's a saying in my office, and it's behind every successful woman is a pack that's got her back. So welcome to the pack.
Thank you so much. I accept that.
Well, you and I talked about what maybe two ideal goals for our time with our audience today. Do you want to share that with them?
Sure. I say that if everyone on this Zoom session with us could walk away with these two things, then we've had a successful day for today. The first is we want to make sure that everyone is comfortable and understand the vocabulary associated with allyship. The allyship is on a continuum, it's on a spectrum, so you can do a little bit and still be in the allyship spectrum, and you can do a whole lot and still be in the allyship spectrum. So we just wanted to make sure everyone had the vocabulary. The second thing we wanted was to make sure that everyone knew that whatever they come to the table with, whatever experience, background, way of life, who they are, you have the ability to be an ally. So I don't want anybody to think that it has to be just a majority population or a majority voice that can only be an ally. All of us can be allies. And so we want to make sure that we debunk some myths and empower everyone to go and, just advocate on behalf of others that don't have the same privileges that they do.
Well, there's our goals, and let's kind of take this crowd on a journey. So if you're in the audience, I'm going to do a really teacher thing, and I'm going to ask you to take out your pad and paper or whatever note-taking device that you might have with you right now. And we decided ahead of time what your 5 vocabulary words were going to be for this session. So I'm going to list them out for you, and then we'll go through a process of defining, and we'll share some stories back and forth about how we see this showing up in our work and our lives, to hopefully bring these to light and maybe spark some questions. As always, as questions come to mind, put them in the chat, because we have one of our amazing Jenkins MBA volunteers in the room with us. Vi, I know you're out there listening, and she's going to keep track of some questions. So everybody ready to take your concepts. So we're going to define the following terms: actor, ally, accomplice, intersectionality, and privilege. And I'm going to make a note, going to define these in terms of what I'm familiar in a kind of vocabulary speaking in a social justice kind of definition. And the more you get comfortable with these words and how to use them, the further you will go on your journey. So let's start with actor. In the terms of in that spectrum of allyship, we define actor as maybe someone who holds some beliefs about unfairness or injustice, but they're not able to act, or there's something keeping them from disrupting. Maybe when those isms kind of show up in either their interpersonal world or in those side conversations at work or at that after work party or something that you're at the weekend, and you kind of know like, oh, I don't know if that's really the right thing to say, but haven't taken that next step to do anything about that. So thoughts, examples that kind of come to mind, Demetris?
Sure, thank you. So, how often I see actors show up, and just to make sure that we're clear with everyone, actors are important too. So, it's not like if you are an actor, it's a bad thing. It just means that you haven't taken that extra step for whatever reason, right? There could be a whole host of reasons. So, oftentimes, actors are the ones that you see that, will have the stickers, the ally stickers on their laptops, or they'll wear the t-shirts, or they may even show up to a volunteer event, every now and then, so that if there's something that a group or a demographic is doing, say for instance, if it's Pride or your Black Employee Resource Group or Black student groups, they may be doing something in the community that the actor will say, I want to go and participate in this with them. I want to show my support by showing up to this event. Usually there are these isolated type of events, and it's a little bit passive. And again, when we are advocating for ourselves, when we are, a diverse group that's trying to show up, numbers are important, right? So having a huge group of people show up for an event wearing the t-shirt, that sends a strong signal. So that's why actors are just as important, throughout some things. And so the thing about the actor, though, is that they stop just short. Say, as you just mentioned, right, they may see something when they're not at the event, but they might not go the extra step to just call it out and stop it right there in that moment. A lot of times actors give themselves the title of ally because of their proximity to a diverse population. So it may be that, sometimes you have men that says that they're allies because they have a daughter. Well, they may see some injustices in the workplace against women, and most would say, oh, well, he's an ally because he has a daughter. But if he's not stopping those injustices and speaking out for it on behalf of women, he's not really an ally. He's just an actor. So just want to make sure that people don't confuse being an ally because they are in close proximity to a diverse population.
Thank you for the shift to ally. So to be educational in nature, here's what we decided ahead of time. We would kind of take the moment to define an ally. Allies are taking personal responsibility to challenge kind of those isms that we see around us. And when I say the isms, they're the real common things, right? It starts with colonialism, right? Sexism, heterosexualism, heteronormative, and you can go down the list. There's a lot of isms. And so an ally is going to be able to maybe say something. It's the key there that you just expressed is take action. Mm-hmm. So they want to, they'll see themselves maybe making the comment like, hey, we shouldn't be perpetuating this, or hey, we need to have a different perspective on the situation. But they're definitely taking that next step in that interpersonal way. Can we make a quick note though? Being an ally, because it's behavior based, it's not something that we can give ourselves as a title.
Right.
Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Oh, wholeheartedly agree with that. It's interesting because ally is a noun, but most people will say ally is a verb. It's the act itself, the act of doing something. So if you were to walk away with something today, kind of a sub bullet, it would be that allyship is a verb. It's the act of doing something, calling something out. And, to put it in terms that, you hear about a lot, think about unconscious bias, right? And everybody talks about unconscious bias a lot. Unconscious bias is recognizing that you have a bias, everyone has a bias, and you're just, that's that awareness. But when you become an ally or becomes a verb is when you go into see bias, block bias. It's not just, effective, and actually research says it actually is more harmful to just notice your bias and then don't actively do something to block it, or notice bias in others and don't do something to actively block it. So see bias, block bias, interrupting the interrupters. So if you see that someone keeps constantly interrupting the minority voice or the underrepresented voice in a room, and you don't do something to say, hey, I notice you keep interrupting her or him, or I noticed that, such and such has something that they need to say. They have something important. We need to have that too. Those are all ways that you're actively doing something. You're just not seeing it. You're not just empathizing with it, but we are actually stopping something in its tracks.
I love how you just pointed out a couple great behaviors that work in almost any work environment. I heard the affirming a voice that might be getting silenced in a meeting, or marginalized in a meeting or a space. And I hear you using what I have also watched in my own colleagues, echoing. If it seems like someone presents an idea and it just gets kind of brushed aside and overlooked and stepped over, but we can bring the attention back. I want to echo what my colleague just mentioned. Can we go back to that?
Right.
So those would be signs of using ally behaviors.
Right. And even, we don't even have to put it in such, professional terms, right?
Sure.
Like, how many of us have been out and about and someone has said that off-color joke, right? That everyone laughs at. And it seems to, you don't want to be the party stopper, right? But you have to call out things. In this day and time, I can't tell you how many of the coronavirus jokes that we're hearing that are, just whether it's targeted at Asians or Asian Americans or, the elderly or any of those things. How many of us are actively saying, no, that's not cool, or that's perpetuating something? So you can actually do it in your everyday lives, around the dinner table at home, when a family member, especially Thanksgiving is the best way to become an ally, because you will always have those inappropriate family members from whatever walk of life. And so just calling them out as well and just telling them, hey, that's not cool. That's allyship. That's actively doing something.
Great. And I've heard us begin to creep towards our third vocabulary word, which we decided would be an accomplice. So yes. I'll give the definition of what we decided to run with accomplice. And it's challenging the isms that we see in our systems, whether those are structures at work or structures in our own personal lives. And it's more of a take that it's use of one's individual power, and recognizing that freedom and liberty isn't something that can be granted for one group and not for all, that it's codependent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's accomplice works is really, really informed and guided and taken in collaboration and side by side with the group that we're intending to help, or lift up, or be that ally with.
Yeah, and you're right. It's an excellent point that you made about it's in collaboration with that group. But sometimes you're having to take action when the group isn't even empowered to be able to do so. It's when you have a position of influence that they may not have, and you're going to take a stand on their behalf. And so sometimes that's what can be the most powerful accomplices, right? And that's the most, highest level form of allyship. When you can take action when the group is not able to take action for themselves, when they don't have a voice or don't have a seat at the table. And you do so understanding that there are risks to you, whether they're political risks, sometimes there's criminal risk, there's career risk, there's alienation of friends and relationships and family members, all of those things. There's some type of negative impact that you are willing to risk in order for you to advocate for and be an ally to that group. That's what an accomplice is someone that's willing to take that risk, go out on a limb without any type of regard to what the consequences are. You're willing to accept that. One thing that I think of like probably one of the highest forms of accomplice that I've seen. As I said, I used to be the executive director of the National Bar Association. And I want to say it was at my first annual meeting someone stood up at the plenary session because they wanted to present a proposal to start an LGBTQ section of the National Bar Association. It was so many lessons learned through that process, because one was, don't assume that if you're in a room full of diverse people, or in a room where everyone looks like you or has the same professional career, or you're all students, that all of you are allies for all issues. Because the National Bar Association at the time, and still is, was largely cisgender men, heterosexual Christians. And so for someone to stand up, which I still commend this person's bravery, to say, I want to start an LGBTQ section, and this was, what, 10 years ago? You can imagine how that was, reacted to. And there was this president, and she's still a mentor of mine to this day. She stood up and said, I will shut this plenary session down unless we give the person the floor and the respect that he deserves. She was willing to table her entire agenda. And your plenary session, you only get one of those a year at an annual meeting. She was willing to shut her entire agenda down for the year in order to make sure that that person had a voice that was heard and it was respected. That's why she's still my mentor today. And I always tell people about, one, don't assume that because you're in a room that everyone looks like you, that you're amongst people that are, are aligned with you on everything. And two, just the power of the voice and your willingness to take a stand against something. So that's what an accomplice means to me.
That is a very empowering story, and it's an example how accomplice work shows up regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be ready to see that opportunity.
Yeah. And the thing that, sometimes people get misconstrued is accomplice work means that you have to be willing to get arrested, or you're chained to a fence, or you're in front of the wrecking ball. Like, those are, high level and extreme, but there are some that are just as effective that you can do in your everyday walk of life. Again, if your family members don't keep making those off-color jokes, are you willing to get up and, upset your mom from walking away from the dinner table at Thanksgiving and say, Mom, I can't come back, until the family kind of does things a little bit differently? We see that all the time, where people are like, I can't go to family meetings anymore, or family dinners, or family things, because we have that racist or sexist or whatever is uncle or whatever that just won't quit their behavior. So are you willing to do that? Like, those are some of the things that, you can be an accomplice and be just as effective without getting arrested.
Yes, that we need the real agitators out there in the world,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't necessarily all leave our day jobs to go be agitators. I need them out there. I need them working, pushing the system from their point. But we also can push the systems from where we sit.
Exactly.
In each of those levels.
Mm-hmm.
You began to kind of describe one of these colleagues a moment ago with some social categories. And I want to kind of rewind back there real quick. You mentioned a colleague who identified white and cisgender and male and Christian. And I want to pause here, or I don't even pause here, we're pivoting to our fourth vocabulary word, which is intersectionality. So intersectionality was coined by a researcher who is a leading scholar in critical race theory. Her name is Kimberly Crenshaw, and that's Kimberle with an accent. Vi, maybe you can put that in our chat so that everyone can look her up. Right now, she currently is at UCLA's law school. 30 years ago, Kimberly changed the way we were talking about the systems and the structures of our society 30 years ago. In her conversation, in the conversations all of us who are empowered to do this work and passionate for this work, we're still referencing her theories. So she said intersectionality is the nature that are socialized categories, right? The things about us that have been constructed through society. So our race, our gender, our biological sex, the things about us that are traits and characteristics, but then also some of the areas of our invisible identities, our social class that we're born into, regions of, the country that we're born into, our educational status, our career professional status, a myriad of ways that we shape our identities.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of threw in a little extra vocab word there. So what Kimberly says is that these identities don't exist just by themselves, that what happens is there's these unique modes and these intersections of those identities that can either compound privilege or compound experienced oppression. So talk to us a little bit about how intersectionality comes into play with understanding our role as an ally or an accomplice.
I think that even if I could just ask everyone that's joining us today, is think about who you are as a person and all of your identities. I'm pretty sure, Taya, that some people will come up to you and say, okay, Taya, you are a white woman. And they stop there at what they can see. And then they start identifying with you as a white woman, and that's it. Or as me, a Black woman, or whatever it is. Like you said, most people will stop at those identity dimensions of diversity. But I am a woman of color. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. I have professional degrees. I was a first generation college student. I, used to play sports, and now I am a couch potato. Like, all of those things come into play. And so when you are being an ally for someone, you have to also get to know the whole person, because oftentimes you will be an ally for something that doesn't really align with the person. So say, for instance, I have some of my friends who are, they might have went to private school, and they are fifth generation college students, like a history of doctors, lawyers, PhDs, and all those things. And they may look just like me, but I am a first generation college student who, just grew up, socioeconomically disadvantaged, if that's a term. And so people will approach me and my friends who look exactly the same and assume that they are an ally for all of us, and they may not be. And so when you're being an ally, make sure you're doing a little bit of, digging deeper than just beyond what you can see. That's where that intersectionality comes into play. There's so many different identities, so many different layers to people. And if you just go in and assume that you're advocating on their behalf because of what's on the surface, then you get into a lot of trouble. And that's when you get into something called centering yourself as an ally. And I know you know a lot about that, Taya. So I'm going to kick that back over to you to just talk about that a little bit more.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak about, from an I statement, because as, and we've already got started on a couple of my layers. I identify white. I identify as I was biologically born a woman. I'm cisgender, so I still identify as a woman. I was born to a daughter of teachers who both accessed higher education, middle-class family from the Pacific Northwest. That's an identity all of its own. And so there's a lot of layers there to my identity that have never really experienced challenge. And in a minute, we're going to pivot over to how the way I've experienced privilege and what privilege is. So I find when I would like to come alongside a colleague or a student or a peer or a team, and I'd like to leverage some of the power that I have or some of the privilege that I have, I need to go through a process of what I consider decentering myself. It's becoming very aware of how much I'm contributing to conversations, being aware that I'm not jumping ahead in conclusions, being very, very active listening, asking for clarification to make sure that I'm hearing what my collaborator is wanting to say, and I try to do it with as much genuine authenticity as possible to help understand that vision. So, and I call that decentering. And as I work with our student groups, I really carefully watch, even in my office.
Yeah.
How do I make my presence a little bit smaller to allow for their full, whole person, their whole identity to come through and to come into those conversations, so that I can take that lead, or take that cue, and follow their lead, is what I meant to say. Is that where you were thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you the most egregious example that I see of people not decentering is when you have boomers and Gen Xers when they're talking to millennials, or anyone that's talking to millennials. It baffles me. And that's where, we talk about how, we're going to talk about this later, about how anybody can be an ally. But a lot of people, when they're in mentoring relationships, and I heard one of the speakers talk about this a little bit earlier on the Women in Tech panel, they were just saying you can be a mentor up and down. Like, you can be a mentor that's, more advanced in your career, that's looking where you can be a mentee, and your mentor can be someone more junior in their career. And so what I found is that when you have people that are more senior, they automatically assume that they know how to be an ally, that they know what you need. As Gina said earlier during her panel, is sometimes mentors will come in with their own agenda and tell you what they want you to do and what they want you to hear, versus really listening and understanding what it is that you want to do and where you want to go and what your concerns are. And so in this work, in this space in which we're in, Taya, in diversity and inclusion and equity, we really always have to be mindful to decenter ourselves. I mean, we come in with our biases as well, and what we think that, someone's story is, but we actually don't know. And we are just going at that surface level, and going back to the point I was making earlier, getting to know that whole person. So get out of your own way. You are not being an ally if you're coming in with your preconceived notions and not willing to learn and allow for someone to educate you through their experiences, so you know how better to be an ally to them, rather than, this is my definition of an ally, this is what they need, and I'm going to do it. That's actually a lot more harmful than anything else.
Can I go off script for just a second?
Always. Like
well, it made me realize that sometimes as we're getting started in this learning process, and I'll speak again as from an I statement, when I began to want to learn more, I made a lot of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I originally felt like it was a sign of just that I'd never get it right, that I will always mess it up. And then I learned that there's actually a lot of forgiveness out there. If when I mess up and I maybe make an assumption incorrectly, or I accidentally, unintentionally, hurt someone's feelings, I learned that if I own that and say, I'm really sorry that I reacted that way, and I'm glad that you told me that I've messed up. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna learn more about this so I can do better. Mm-hmm. So do you mind, like I said, this is a little off script, but do you mind sharing what, in situations, either you found yourself kind of in that oops moment and you want to try and repair that relationship, or vice versa, where you've needed to deliver a little bit of feedback to someone?
Yeah, I find myself in that almost every day. Like you said, this is a learning journey, and this is human work, like people and experiences and things that we can't even begin to understand. There's no book to understanding every single person and all of their experiences. There's no textbook, there's no PhD program, none of those things. And so quite honestly, if you're not having oops moments every day almost, I'm wondering what you're doing. Like, you're not out there actually in the trenches and, doing the work if you're not having oops moments. Say, for instance, I just had this a few weeks ago. I had a team retreat with my team, And there was someone on my team that it always seemed like we kept talking past each other, right? Just talking past. And I was making the assumption that she just wasn't assertive enough, like that she just wasn't confident enough in her work. Come to find out, she, we do something called a tilt assessment. She's just very methodical about her work. She thinks a lot. She internalizes. And then when she speaks, it's powerful. It's called the quiet genius. Whereas I'm more of a brainstormer, speaking off the cuff. I can process information very, very quickly. And she was making assumptions about me, and I was making assumptions about her. And it was, and it was even assumptions about where we grew up and how we grew up and the degrees we had and the experience. Like, we had layered a whole bunch of stuff on top of it. And I'm in a position of influence as her manager, that had we not had that discussion and really did that work, and I wasn't willing to have those oops moments and be vulnerable and say, this is what my experience is of you, and she wasn't willing to be vulnerable and say, as my manager, this is my experience of you, I could have influenced her career in a negative way. And so I was open to my team and saying, that was my oops moment. I screwed that up. I did the thing that I preach to everybody not to do. I came in with biases. I came in with assumptions. I was in a position of influence where that is the most dangerous to have those things. And after that retreat, it was just a level of expectation is something, oh my gosh, we have to stop introducing new vocabulary, but everyone was talking about the psychological safety on that team that's now created because I was willing to be open and vulnerable with them. And they say, we need for you to just talk more to us and let us know what's going on in your head. And we're not going to hold that against you. And so they made it safe for me to be a leader in the same way that I made it safe for them to call me out on my isms when I have them, right? So that's one example.
Well, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that example. Thank you for walking the talk right there for all of us to learn from. So we have kind of danced up to our last concept that we wanted to share with the group. And I'll specifically tie it to when you just mentioned, when you're in a position of authority, that, that's can compound the impacts, whether it's negative, unintentional, all of the things. So, and it leads me to going back to define what privilege in a societal context means. So, and it is often situated kind of in the opposite end of oppression. And so I did look up that real quick for us too. But when we're talking about societal privilege, we're talking about benefits, advantages, or immunities that are available to an individual because they're a part of a social group. And it's not privilege that was earned. So it's not being able to host this session as a director of diversity and inclusion of undergraduate programs. That's my work, and that is a privilege that I earned to get to this job. But my privilege of coming from a middle-class family that was able to easily access higher education is the privilege that I did not earn, because I didn't pick the family I was born into, and I didn't make the choices for my parents as they were able to send me off to college. Is that an okay comparison? Demetris, can you add?
Yeah, absolutely. If you really think about it, privilege is kind of the linchpin of being an ally, right? If you don't have the privilege, then you actually can't be an ally almost. Don't quote me on that. Let me think about that a little bit more, but it just feels like it's so intertwined there. Oftentimes people make the mistake that if you told everyone to close their eyes and think about what does an ally look like, most of them would pick middle to a little bit older white cisgender men, and they would be like, that's the ally we need. Everyone thinks that that's the golden goose of an ally because they are the most privileged and hold the most power and all those good things. And it's a couple of points I want to make there. One, everyone has the ability to be an ally. All of us has privilege in some shape or form or experience. White women have the ability to be an ally to people of color or women of color. Men can be allies to women. Cisgender can be allies to LGBTQ plus. Able-bodied people can be, allies to people that are differently able or have diverse ability, different abilities. Economically privileged people can be, allies to those that are not as privileged, economically. And so all of those are different ways that you can be allies. I keep going back to, the Gen Zers now and millennials that we're advocating for. There's so many alarming statistics that say that, Gen Zers are like, we don't trust anybody over the age of 45. Like I don't have that number right off the top of my head, but it's an alarming number. And quite honestly, we overheard a group of interns in the cafeteria last summer that said, yeah, we don't trust old people. Like we heard them. And so think about the work that we have to do to advocate on behalf of everyone, those Gen Zers, and we need to learn their experience and get them to trust us to share what's going on. And they naturally don't trust us. So I had to develop allies to go and let them know that, hey, Demetris is cool. Like you can talk to her, you can trust her. They were able to open a door for me that I just could not walk into on my own. And so allyship can come in so many forms of fashion. And so I want everyone to take that away, to just think about places that you have access to that others may not have access to, and what you can do to help others gain access there. And that can just happen in all shapes, forms, think about the people that's sitting somewhere differently in the cafeteria. Who can you pull into a meeting with you? Who can you invite into the study group that your friends may not be a part of? Just look for those different places and spaces there.
I think we can maybe even take a moment of self-reflection. And I often will ask this when I'm doing trainings through Poole College of Management, and I'll say, let's take a moment and reflect about any aspect of our identities that we had at one point in time actively had to hide from other people. It might be a situation where you're afraid if other people found out about this aspect of your life story or your history or your family, or that you would be alarmed. You'd be concerned that you wouldn't be accepted. It might cause a rift. And when you're thinking back at that time or that experience, how much did it cost you to keep that hidden? And another word we use a lot is covered. It's psychologically, emotionally, mentally exhausting. And it's almost like doing a full second job on top of just showing up to be where you're at. So if we can get a line of empathy just through that one kind of connection to what it felt like, even for a brief moment or for a little while, of having to cover a part of our identity, if we can develop that line of empathy, we can start along a path of discovery to being an ally. Because sometimes the question is just as simple as, how can I help? What's your favorite question that begins to build an allyship conversation, Demetris?
My favorite question, that's a really good question. You didn't give me that before. We're off script, Taya. I want to make sure I'm not being superficial here, but a lot of times the question that I get a lot, just because I'm pretty connected, is, who do you know? That's typically, that's a normal question for me, where people will come up to me and just say, who do you know who? And I usually will then start asking them more questions like, hey, I know this person, but tell me more what you need. And then that's when we really get into the dialogue, and I'm able to step in and say, you're asking me to connect you here, but actually let me show you how you can really influence and impact what you're trying to get done. So usually someone just asking me, who do I know, is enough. Sometimes that's all an ally needs, is for you to make that connection, send that email to say, hey, this student is trying to get an internship at your company. I think you should take a look at their resume. Simple as that. Or I know that I have 30 minutes on the calendar with you. Are you okay if I cede 5 minutes of my time to this group that wants to come in and talk to you about this? Those are all different ways that you can just be an ally. And it starts with just asking, who do you know? And that point that I think the question you just made is just as powerful, is how can I help? Don't be afraid to ask. If you need allies, most people are willing to be allies. They just don't know that they can. Sometimes being an ally, we talked about, it's not a passive thing, but sometimes it's just showing up. You showing up in the room with a group of students, or you're just standing behind, or you're adding your name to a letter or on a signatory to a position. Those are amazing ways that you can be allies if they ask you. So if you need someone to be an ally, ask. It's a two-way street. I mean, a perfect world, allies will show up and say, hey, I'm ready to be an ally, put me to work. But on the other side, you have the responsibility, if you need them, to ask them, would they be willing to be? And it's not, are you willing to be an ally? Most people don't even know what that word means, right? Are you willing to send that email? Are you willing to make that phone call for me?
Exactly. Well, we are at 3:42, and I think we have a couple questions. Vi, what do we have coming from our chat line? I'm going to scroll down. Vi, let me know that one question was there a specific time in your life or an experience when you felt like you found your voice?
I would say it's interesting. How I grew up and with the strong mother I had, I always knew that I had a voice. And what she did was made sure that I knew what I needed to do and the support systems that I needed to set up so that I always could feel that I had a voice. She was like, make sure you have your own. Make sure you save so that you have 6 months of spending. Like, these are things that she taught me. Even when we didn't have a lot of money growing up, she was like, make sure that if you ever get in a situation where you need to walk away from, you can. And so I've had that privilege, to use that word, throughout my career, where I was able to kind of step out and have the voice and be the voice for the voiceless, because I knew that I could walk away at any moment. And so there's even times now that I'll cover for my team or for a group that says, you can't pick that fight, but I can. Because I can go home and out, what, are they gonna fire me? I hope no one from Red Hat and in my management chain is like on this call, but I've just always just tried to live my life that I never allow anyone to take my voice away from me. And so I can't say that I've, found my voice. I think I've amplified my voice a bit. I've learned, kind of when to pick my fights and pick my battles and all those good things. And I learned early on that every fight is not a fight. You can be an ally, and you have to be strategic about this thing, because if you become that agitator all the time, then you might not get invited into some of those spaces that you need to influence. So it's that, that double-edged sword there. And so sometimes you need to stand on the table, and sometimes you need to go quietly in the back door and slide your proposal on someone's desk. And so, yeah, I can say that my difference was in finding the voice, but just amplifying my voice and making sure that I knew where I had, places of influence. Sometimes I might not pick the small fight, like, the battle. I'm going for the war. So it may look like I'm not saying something about something that's down here because I'm going for the jugular up there. So yeah, so it's just all about amplification for me. But that's a great question.
We're going to do one more question until my team tells me that I'm done and out of here. I'll just keep it rolling. Okay, question. Someone once told me you'll never understand the importance of being an ally until you see someone you love get hurt. Or you need an aha moment, if you will. It seems to me like these are moments that push people from actors to allies. What are your thoughts?
I would say that unfortunately, most people do need that precipitating event in order for them to actually feel empathy and move towards it. I would assert that that's almost an excuse. You don't have to have that precipitating event. I can see what's happening, in my community and around me, and it not necessarily be someone that I personally know. Or I can see something that's on television and it personally impacts me, and I can be moved to act. When you are in the government, so my last position was at the chief of staff at, the DC Council up in Washington, DC. There were so many people that I weren't personally connected to, but I was in a position of influence and I was moved to act. And so I would say, don't rest on your laurels and be like, hey, if it's not happening to me in my household and someone that I love, that I can't do something, I can't be that ally. No, lean into it. Every day you should be waking up saying, who can I make a difference in the life of today? Like, just looking for someone. And again, it doesn't have to be you're doing this heavy major, joining the marches and all that good stuff, but can you make that call? Send that text and say, hey, I have 5 minutes of free time. Can I make a call for you? Is there something I can do? So don't wait for those moments. There's a lot of people that need that hit, hit upside the head, but that doesn't have to be always the case. We can lean into it without those moments.
I agree. I think that there are baby steps that we can take once we have awareness raised, and awareness can come, like you said, because I can see it on TV. I can see it in my community. I can hear it being talked about around me. I'm going to try and sneak in one more question, but I do believe this will be our last one.
5 more minutes. We should be at like 4 or maybe 3 now.
Okay, we're at 3 now. If someone is speaking or acting from a position of unearned privilege, how do you help them realize that?
Unearned privilege. Taya, what do you think unearned privilege means there? Like, I want to make sure that I'm not.
I think I do this a lot. Usually the way it will sound is when someone is sharing their perspective on a situation with me, and I will share with them, I'm hearing you say that you hadn't had to think about that before. Or I'm hearing you say that it seems really far from your lived experience that that person would have that same experience.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. Something that I do, and it drives a lot of people nuts, is when they're speaking from that place, I'll just ask, is that the truth for everyone? That's just how I leave it. I'm like, is your truth the truth for everyone? Are there any type of examples where this wouldn't be the case? Most people, when they're coming from that position of unearned privilege, will get very defensive about that. But just keep it there. You don't have to move it. Don't explain it away. Like, no, I'll repeat the question. They'll go and start pontificating about a whole bunch of other stuff. But just keep it right there. Is your truth the truth for everyone?
Absolutely agreed. I think we have to end on this, and that is because in all of this work, it is completely possible for two truths to be existing at the same time.
Exactly. That's a great way to end it.
And that's why it's hard to bring those two together to closer understand each other. You are an inspiring, radical woman. And I'm so glad that you are part of the Wolf Pack. I'm so glad that you're in our community in Raleigh, and anything you ever need from us at Poole College of Management and the Jenkins team and the undergraduate programs, we got you. We got your back.
No, thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity. I am proud to say I have a pack behind me now, so go pack. I have to learn that. I'll get it next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Demetris. Thank you, Taya. You both are great.
Thank you so much.
Demetris and Taya, thank you so much for this critical conversation that has explained diversity and inclusion terms and have really brought us closer to thinking about how we can become an ally in these different situations to different people and even populations. And thank you for bringing your full selves to us today and modeling what it means to be an ally through your transparency and your vulnerability. We really appreciate this.
No, thank you so much.
I'll just add some closing words to end our day. I want to congratulate everyone because we have all radically collaborated, all 200 participants, men and women today during our Innovative Women's Conference in a virtual setting. I and the conference planning team are moved after hearing all the experiences and the stories from our fantastic participants. We appreciate everyone's positive energy, flexibility, and openness, which has created an awesome virtual experience. Our keynote, Gina Lofton from Microsoft, challenged us to think about the different ways that you make an impact in your work that ties directly to radical collaboration. The first is, what have I personally done to impact bottom line results? Second, what do I do to impact the success of others? And thirdly, who am I showing up as a leader to create space for the others to succeed? Today, we hope you feel a little bit lighter and more energized and can carry this into the ways that you radically collaborate in the next few weeks and into your future. While you have some downtime and adapt to what the new normal looks like, let's thoughtfully consider the possible life you may have prototyped this morning from Dr. Shamblin's Design Your Life workshop. What do you need to do, or who do you need to talk to in order to start living this imagined life? While advocating for this imagined life, how do you also radically collaborate with others who are on a different spectrum than you and become their ally? We have a few logistic reminders for resources that will be posted on our website shortly. First, we'd love for you to connect on our LinkedIn event and find the participants of this conference and find a way to continue the conversation with them. We'll also provide the virtual notebook for a recap of all of the sessions that were presented today. And finally, don't forget that Kathleen from E&J Gallo has provided a free at-home workout for you to enjoy. And I'll leave you with this quote to walk into your weekend by Sonia Renee Taylor. Celebrating difference is nice, but not transformative. It is constrained by the boundaries of our imaginations. We must strive to create a difference celebrating culture where we see diversity as an intrinsic part of our everyday lives. Thank you, innovative people. Stay in touch.
Can we all on video for one wave goodbye?
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, this is great. I got to take a picture though.
Yeah, grab a picture of everybody.
Wherever you are, come off video and join us.
You got it?
I got it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Go back.
Thank you.
Thanks for participating.
Bye.
We did it, guys.